March 19th.
March 19th, 1989.
And Sunday.
It's Sunday.
And who are you interviewing?
I'm interviewing my Aunt Ethel.
Your great Aunt Ethel.
My great Aunt Ethel. Whatever. When did your family come to America?
To America? Offhand, I'd say in the high 1890 something.
That's good.
For the next one.
Okay.
Why did they come to America?
They came to America because they were not happy where they were living, and they wanted to come to a free country.
Where did they come from?
They came from a small town in Austria.
Do you remember the name?
Hmm?
Do you remember the name?
The town? Galicia.
Galicia, yeah. Galicia, is that the town?
That was the town. That's a state. Let's leave it go at that. That's all I know.
Where were you born?
I was born in New York City
When did you come to Cleveland?
when I was 5 years old.
So you came with Aunt Helen and Uncle Bill? Aunt Rose wasn't born yet.
She was born here.
When were you born?
1905.
How many children were there in your family?
2 boys.
No,
Three
boys.
My own, I'm thinking of my sons.
And Ethel had 2 sons.
I had 2 sons, but in my family, we had 3 boys and 3 girls.
Who were your parents?
Reuben and Dora Brath.
What were they like?
What were they like? Oh, they were young people. They used to like to go dancing when they met, and they won prizes for dancing.
Did they really?
They really did. My mother and father were excellent dancers. And all I know is I grew up that my mother and father had won prizes. That's how they met.
Really? Through dancing?
Yeah,
In New York?
in New York. Well, my mother
How old was Grandma when she came over?
in her low teens. I think she was about 12 or 13.
And Grandpa?
Well, he was young too, because they were very young when they met. They were both in their teens yet.
How old were they when they got married?
I was born when she was 21.
Okay. That's the question? I'm sorry.
What did your father do for a living?
He was a tailor. He used to make ladies' clothes. And then he got promoted, and he was a foreman. And he was a foreman for many years.
Was he I'm sorry. Was he a tailor in New York?
Yes, but that was one of the reasons they came to Cleveland.
Really?
Because Mr. Mannheim, who later married my Aunt Sarah, came away from there, and he was a foreman or a big shot in New York.
Uh-huh.
And he brought Uncle Max, had Uncle Max come,
Uh-huh.
and then my father followed, and then we all came.
Oh, okay.
And I remember the trip that we took when I was 5 years old. My mother and my grandmother and my Aunt Sarah and my brother Willie and Helen and myself, we all came on a train, and we had to sleep on a double-decker.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Really?
And I was the biggest one, and my Aunt Sarah decided she was going to sleep up there. I should help her get up. So I got behind her, stood on the lower berth, and got behind her and pushed, and we knocked her through.
Did you really?
She didn't fall down, but she almost did. She got through, and I was left hanging. That was, look at that, all of these years and years, and I still remember that.
Do you remember? I mean, you can actually picture
I can picture it.
Yeah, that's funny. Oh my God.
That must have been hysterical, because in my mind now, I can see it as the immigrants coming into the world.
What did Grandma do? What did your mother do?
Oh, my mother was young. My mother was always younger than everybody.
Really?
Yeah. full of vitality.
Was she the youngest in her family?
No,
She had,
she had two other sisters that were older than she, and her younger sister, who was my Aunt Sarah, that was her youngest sister.
okay.
And then she had Uncle Max, and she had two brothers, Uncle Max and Uncle Irv.
There were 6 children in her family as well.
Yeah.
And Grandpa had like 5 brothers, 4 brothers.
Grandpa had Uncle Nathan was next to Uncle Ruby, which was my father,
Yeah.
and then Ed was the youngest,
John.
and John. Those two were the youngest. Ben was the middle one. There's 5 boys, but they were a nice family. My grandmother was a lovely lady.
Really?
My father's mother. I don't remember my mother's mother too well. She came with us when we came from New York.
She did, but not to live here, just to visit, or she came to live?
She came to live and didn't like it here. She was unhappy.
So she went
So
back.
she went back after a few years.
When you lived in New York, do you remember where you lived? You don't remember where you lived?
I remember, I think I do. I lived on the east side, not far from Rivington.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, I love to go shopping.
yeah, I do too. I'd love to go,
Yeah.
but that I remember.
Yeah, that's nice.
What else do you want me to remember?
What else do
What's
you?
your?
Do you remember your grandparents?
Yes, yes.
Well, let's put it this way. We had, the Braffs had a grandmother and a grandfather. Yes, I remember them. They were nice people.
What were their names? Do you remember?
Sarah was my
Sarah,
grandmother's
right.
name.
Jacob? No.
No, what was Uncle?
Grandpa.
My grandfather's name. Reuben. No, Reuben was my father's name. One of the boys was Philip.
Oh,
Parrots.
Parrots. Yeah.
That was my grandfather's name.
Okay, that's who Grandpa was named after, Josiah.
Yeah. What else did you want to know?
Did they all live in the United States?
Oh, sure. All that we knew.
All the family you knew came over to the United States.
All but one member of the family that did not. From my mother's side, now remember. My father's side were all here.
They were here before.
Yeah. This brother came into focus when we were visiting in New York one time. We were grown and married, and I was at my uncle and aunt's house, and somebody knocked on the door, and it was a long-lost relative, one of the brothers from my mother's family.
Really?
Yeah, it's my mother's family.
That stayed over in Austria, in that area?
Yeah, and somehow got over and was trying to find the pot of gold. So they did sponsor him for a while, and then I don't know what happened.
He didn't stay in Cleveland?
He was never in Cleveland.
Oh,
This
he
was
was in
while
New
I
York.
was in New
Or
York.
when you were little?
No, when I was
when
growing
you
up
came
and
back,
visiting there.
Yeah. That's funny.
I wonder if Pootie remembers anything about him. He probably would.
You should ask Grandpa.
Yeah.
Where did you live when you were a little girl?
When you came to Cleveland, where did you live?
We came to Cleveland. We lived in a very rich section. My uncle and my two uncles and my father got us an apartment in a building I think it had to have at least 8 suites in it, and we were living next door to Rabbi Margolis. It was on 46th and Euclid. That was a very ritzy neighborhood. That's
Yeah.
all I remember about it, though.
How long did you live there?
Maybe a year. I don't think it was that much. Not maybe a year. With that whole family, Uncle Max, Uncle Abe, my father, 3 children, my grandmother, my Aunt Sarah, everybody lived in that apartment. I don't know where or how or anything, but I know we all lived together. And next door to that was the Reformed rabbi who was well known here in the city at that time, So I don't know how we moved or why we moved, but it's very possible we were asked to move. I don't know. I'm thinking all these people, how in the world could they do?
It probably was a big apartment though. Those are big apartments over there. They used to be big apartments.
Well, where'd they get all the beds? I don't know. I really don't remember anything about it. But anyway, that's where we lived. And so the outcome of that was that we never lived in the totally Jewish section.
Always in different areas.
As we grew up. It wasn't until the younger ones were grown up and I was out of the house that they came closer to,
Glenville.
the only place that I can remember that was totally Jewish from the very beginning was 90th and St. Clair.
When did you remember living? You don't remember living there though, or when you lived there?
What?
Did you live there or you just?
I lived there. We lived there in a 4-family house or 6-family house. That's where the boys all met their friends in that area. And I
Is that
know
where Patrick Henry, where Dad went to elementary school?
that was before his time.
Oh.
Sure, that was before his time. No, it wasn't before his time. That's where he learned to swear. Oh, yes, that's true. That's true.
That's where Grandpa learned to swear just like.
And that's where we had, that's where Pootie's, where he got his name from.
Oh, with the dog.
From the dog that lived next door to us. And he couldn't say Beauty, which was the dog's name. So Benji trained him to say Pootie, or Benji taught him. I don't know which way. But that's where he got his nickname. He couldn't say Beauty, so he said Pootie.
Really? And that's when they started calling him that?
You ever hear anything so silly? That's where that happened. Look at these things I'd forgotten about. I didn't know existed.
That's funny. How old was he?
Pootie at that time was a baby.
Really?
Yeah. He was such a cute little, boy. Did you know he was my flower bearer when I got married?
Yeah, he tells us.
And my father made him a white suit, long pants.
Really?
At that time, boys wore short pants. He was beautiful. Big blue eyes with blonde hair.
Really?
But you had to wash him. The other one, not this one. Is a good example of what he was. Anyway,
What else you
what
got?
else do you want to know?
Where did you go to school and what was it like?
What was it like
And where did you go to school?
to
Remember we went to elementary
first
school?
one, I'm thinking of that's what I'm trying to think of, the elementary school. Empire, I went to junior high. I went to Glendale. That's it. And then I took a business course. And I learned billing and bookkeeping.
Really?
And I worked for 4 years before I was married.
That's nice.
What was it like?
Huh? What was it like?
Oh, it was delightful.
Just like school now.
I still go to school.
You still take classes?
What was it like when you were growing up?
It was very nice. We had a nice time. I know I used to come home from school on Friday night and have to wash the floors, because on every Shabbos you wash floors.
Really?
Yeah,
Did Grandma bake bread?
always,
Yeah.
always.
Dad used to
Mother-
tell a story that Grandma used to have soda pop and all the, do you remember that?
What?
Dad used to tell the story that Grandma always kept soda in the refrigerator, in the icebox
For what?
for his friends and for the friends and the
Oh,
neighbors.
yes, everybody knew that. I don't know who it was I saw not so long ago that mentioned that. The boys that came up, remember, and I'm out of the house and on my own with the family already.
Yeah, with your boys.
When this was talking. But my mother was very hospitable. My mother loved kids around her. So the kids all brought their friends to the house.
Yeah.
And that was good.
Tell the story of when Grandpa came home from the hospital, and Grandpa was the only one that was born in a hospital, wasn't he?
Yes.
The sixth child was the only one of your grandparent, of your great-grand.
The rest were born at
The
home?
rest were born at home? Were you born at home?
Of course. My mother had a midwife.
And for Uncle Bill and Aunt Helen and Aunt Rose also?
They had to because they were born in New York.
And they all had midwives?
Yes,
And then Grandpa was the only one that was born at the
in
hospital?
the hospital.
And when he came home from the hospital, because Uncle Ben, who was 5 years older, or Uncle Ben, who was 5 years older, was sleeping in the crib still, they had to put Grandpa in the drawer?
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember
The
that.
great-grandparents put your Grandpa in the drawer to sleep when he was a baby.
And I'll tell you something else. I think this is nice because my mother had a way, just the way Pootie gets under the skin of the kids. Well, my mother had a way that I, who was the oldest of 6 children, when Pootie was born, I didn't want to give my mother up. I wanted my mother. She was my friend and she was my mother. And I remember coming in one day from school and I was 15 years old now. And she was visiting with a friend of hers, rocking on the chair. And I pushed the baby away and she said to my friend, "Can you imagine that at that age? She still wants me to hold her."
Really? You still remember that?
Yes.
Oh my God.
I was 15 years old. I should remember it. I thought it was cute. But I remember her saying that, you know.
That's fine. How old was she when you were born?
35.
No.
No, Pootie.
When Grandpa was born. Oh, so she was like 20 when you were born.
Yeah. She was married before she was 21.
Yeah.
That I know.
Yeah.
But we always argue about that. There's a year missing.
Somewhere.
Yeah. Rosie says on her certificate, look, I speak of her as though she's in the present. She always said that her birth certificate was a year different than mine. Mine would have to be the right one because I was the first one.
Right, and she wouldn't have.
No, and she was the 4th one.
Yeah.
By the same token, so many things occurred during that passing of time that it's possible that the records
Got confused.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I think that mine was right, and my father, I think, was 23 years old when I was born.
Really?
My
Do you have
father.
a middle name?
Whose middle name?
Do you have a middle name?
Yes,
What was your middle name?
Yidis,
Yidis?
Ethel Yidis.
Really?
My name is Ethel Jean.
Ethel Jean. Oh,
Uh-huh.
that's pretty.
And what was Aunt Helen's middle name?
Chaya. Chaya was very sick for a long time.
Your aunt was,
Helen,
Aunt Helen was sick?
very sick. And they went to shul and gave her another name.
Really?
They called her Chaya.
Which is like Clara.
No, Chaya means life.
Oh, like.
My mother went through plenty with the kids. They all had some problem, like every other mother and father.
Yeah.
But Helen was the sick one. Consequently, I went to work as soon as I was through with school, and I worked all the time. My sister Helen didn't work very much because she wasn't well. But after a while, she got herself a job in selling dresses at Stearns.
Oh, she worked at Stearns?
Yeah,
Did she really?
yeah, she was a good salesperson. They liked her. My sister Rosie never worked.
Didn't she really?
Never worked. Supposed to be, she had to stay home and look after my mother and father. That's a lot of baloney. Let her rest in.
You know, she's looking down at you and saying,
know, and
Helen or Ethel.
Yeah, I always tell her that. But it seems that we had a friend that had a little restaurant of some kind, and he asked her to help him work, and she did work for a couple of weeks maybe. That was the extent of her work.
Really? Oh my gosh.
But she was a help to my mother. She must have been. She wouldn't have stayed home. And,
Uncle Bill?
oh, Bill. Well, Uncle Bill was self-sufficient a long time before his time, in that he was always helping people out but couldn't help himself.
Really?
And the final analysis is when your father came along, that they sort of put him, he sort of gave him a hand, and he went into business then.
Yeah.
And it's from that time on that he made money. That was many, many years later. But they did try with that company that they,
Oh, yeah.
what was the name of it?
It's like, yeah.
I want to call it Ezra Tolman.
No.
That's an organization.
Yeah, no. It was something else. You're right. I can't think what it was.
Well, we hit that was going well. That was going successful. They made a party for the whole family, and we shared on the first celebration of its existence, or the
Really?
second, I don't know. They were doing very well. We had stock in the issue and everything.
Yeah, that's funny.
And somewhere along the line, one of them didn't do well. Generally, I would say it was Willie. He wasn't very dependable. He's a good leader. Not a leader, a guider for the next one, but not for himself. But he ended up being a very successful man, and that's all through Booty.
Yeah, that's funny. Just like,
What is the earliest memory you have that you can think of?
The earliest memory I have, I'm going to tell you what the earliest memory I have. It's always lived with me. It's just before we came away from New York.
so you're around 5 years old.
Well,
4 or
I
5.
was considerably under 5 years old, and I had just gotten over the measles. And I was walking down a long flight of stairs, and my grandmother, my grandmother came over to me and smoothed my forehead and pushed my hair down to pat me and gave me a hug and said that she's glad I feel better, and she went on upstairs and I went outside.
And that's your first memory?
That's all I can remember.
Oh my gosh. Do you remember being sick with the measles?
I must have been better because she looked at me and she said, "You look better," something like that. I wasn't sick. I don't remember.
Did she
being-
speak English, your grandmother? Did she
Oh,
speak
yes.
English or Yiddish? Only
She spoke both.
both, but she spoke English clearly.
At home, what did you speak?
Well, when I was in New York, it was Jewish. But the minute I came here, we dropped the Jewish because we went to school,
And so you spoke English?
and I spoke English. Consequently, my mother and father spoke English. But my father had already gone to school and had learned to read and write, but not enough. So I remember his sitting in the kitchen table studying.
Really?
And it seems to me I remember different ones in the family would help him with the studying. But my father did well. He spoke well. He wrote all right. He used to write his mother a letter in Jewish every week and give her $2 in the envelope so she'd have something
He'd send it to New York?
to New York. Yeah. My grandmother was a widow then. My grandfather died when he was 62 years old.
Well, he was young.
He came home from work. He was tired. Before dinner, he lay down on the bed and he never got up. He just fell asleep. That's a wonderful way to go. Look at what Rosie just did.
Yeah.
But he was very young.
He was young.
But they had a hard life. He used to, they had no training. They were religious people. And when they came here and had to make a living, they did what came easy as to what they were qualified for. He was taught how to use an iron, so he used to press. Now, here I'd forgotten that ever existed. But I know it subconsciously, you see.
He worked
In some factory,
pressing clothing?
pressing clothing. Because I remember they're saying he died from lifting that heavy iron. Now, if Rosie was here, I doubt if she would even know that. It just wasn't talked about. We just know he came down, lay down, he was tired before he ate dinner, and he didn't wake up.
Do you remember living near them?
No. We did, though, somewhere,
Yeah.
because we were all on the east side. We were closed in like you see the east side of New York,
Yeah.
tenements.
Yeah.
I also remember on my mother's side, now this is all my father's side I'm talking about. On my mother's side, one sister, which was the oldest sister, she must have been a beauty, and so was her second sister. They had these big blue eyes that Pootie has,
Yes.
with very beautiful white skin,
Did they have red hair?
red hair. Beautiful white skin. My Uncle Max had red hair too. And they had a bakery shop. And he used to have the bakery shop down in the basement. You know, you walk downstairs from the outside.
Yeah.
Then on the first level was the street, so they had their store. And then you go up one level again, and that's where their sleeping rooms were. They worked very hard. All of them worked very hard just to make a living. We don't know that kind of life. Thank God I never, you're another generation altogether. I'm talking my generation, right after them.
Yeah.
And I don't remember half of it, what that I was exposed to. But once we moved to Cleveland, it was a different life. We didn't live that way. We separated ourselves from them. That was a sad thing to do, because we had a large family and a lovely family. And my mother and father kept charge of them, kept in touch with them for many years. But as soon as the children got older and my father got sick, it ended, that's all. So we lost contact with them. The only one we kept in contact with was my mother's sister Sarah. That's Dorothy's mother.
Okay.
That's on my mother's side. The rest that we're talking about is Bramps. That's on my father's side.
Yeah.
And the grandmother on my mother's side died when she was an old lady. But I don't know how old. I never got to know her.
How old was your mother when she died?
In her early. We argued. It's either 66 or 67.
And Grandpa? How old was Grandpa?
75. He lived all those years after her, when he's the one that had the stroke. And
He had the stroke before she died?
Oh, sure.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He had the stroke, and Helen and Rosie, he got sick and they took him to the hospital. And Helen and Rosie were with my mother that day. We went up to see him. We had bought a suit. My father always made suits for us. But we had bought this suit, and I took it, we went up to see him in the hospital, and I took it off and showed him the suit, the jacket, and he's watching all this, and I looked up, and all of a sudden I saw his eyes blank. He had gone into a stroke at that particular moment.
Really? Is that when he stopped speaking?
Huh?
Is that when
Never
he-
returned. I yelled for help. The nurses ran in, I remember that. They said there's nothing they could do.
Did he have a problem with his arms or his, no, just his speech?
Oh, no, he carried an arm.
His left arm?
Oh, he was paralyzed on the arm and the leg,
The left leg?
plus his speech.
Yeah.
But you see, maybe it was that time when they weren't as well equipped and knowledgeable as they are today. He didn't get therapy until it was too late to help him. Now I'm here able to talk
Yeah.
because of the therapy that was administered
After your stroke?
immediately after the stroke.
Right, that's what they work with patients.
Yes,
Yeah.
and before he got it, when they got to him, my God, what Pootie used to do to him to make him move. He used to twist that arm around, and my father would scream, "Push him out, push him out." He couldn't say any words, but just the voice. You heard the voice pleading to stop, and Pootie wouldn't stop. He was going to do everything to make him well. He wasn't going to tolerate his being sick.
Yeah.
He was so devoted. He was so devoted. I love my brother with such a passion.
That's your grandpa, Josiah.
Yes.
That's
I
right.
can't
I know.
tell you. And now, I don't know if your mother told you or not, but when my sister Rosie died, I asked her to please be my sister.
My mom? That was nice.
Did she say anything to you?
No.
I remember after the funeral, I said, "I have no more sisters. Will you please be my sister?"
That was nice. She said you've gotten a lot closer. And
Yes.
That's nice. That's why you have family around.
Yeah.
You got any more questions, Josiah?
One more question. Do you remember when Grandpa Phil was born?
Oh, yes. Let me tell you about him. He was born on a holiday. You know what holiday it was?
No.
Yom Kippur. Our holiest holiday of the year. And my mother, after all, I was a big girl and I knew where babies came from, almost. And my mother was feeling sick. She was getting pains, which told her she had to go to the hospital. But she wasn't going to go on a holiday. It was a holy day, you don't desecrate it. So she stayed home and didn't go to the hospital, and when they finally got to take her to the hospital, she almost lost it, I think.
They said that she go on a streetcar to the hospital?
To this day, I'll never know.
That's what you have to say.
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think so. They wouldn't go. I don't know.
Maybe
I never
someone
thought of
drove
it.
them?
There had to be. I know one thing, that at one time when they had trouble in the house with Willie, he climbed on a roof when he was a little boy, got a nail in his foot,
Oh.
and I had to go with the grocery boy who was just delivering an order in his wagon, in his wagon, to call my Uncle Max, who was visiting Aunt Henrietta then. They were courting.
Yes.
To bring him back to the house because the doctor was there and he had to operate on Willie. And they needed somebody to hold him down.
Really?
Really.
How old was he?
A little boy.
Yeah.
About 8, 9 years old. That's all he could have been. He held him down. Uncle Max held him down at one end, my mother at the other end, my father at the other end, and the doctor operated. Went into his groin.
Oh.
And that's where they had to operate. And without anything, because that kid screamed, we stood outside of the window and we heard it all. He was operated on the table.
On the kitchen table?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Talk about old times and different times.
Yes. Now you don't take out a splitter without making sure that...
Without going to the emergency room.
Right. Right. But there's a lot of things in a lifetime that you're not aware of. When you ask to bring it out of your
Yeah.
retentive mind, that's what happens.
So what was it like when they brought Grandpa home? When they brought Dad home? Do you remember when they brought Dad home from the hospital? When they brought Pootie home from the hospital.
What about it?
Do you remember what it was like when he came home?
Did he cry a lot?
As a baby? He never cried. He was tough. I don't think so. I really don't. No. I remember something. I came home from work the day they came to get him.
Really?
What hospital are you talking about?
He was at St. Anne's, I think. Was he at St. Anne's?
Are you talking about what? When he had the measles or chicken pox or something?
When he was born.
Oh, when he was born. There was no fan flare.
No?
No.
They just brought him home and stuck him in the drawer.
That's where he had to sleep. There was no other room. And he was small. Well, you put him in a hamper.
Yeah, no, I know, I'm teasing.
I know, it's not a question of teasing. It was a question of lack of space, and that was where they decided.
When did he get a bed?
And when Rosie outgrew it, and she slept in it until she was 12 years old. And that's why she stayed short all her life, because her feet didn't have
No.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what she said all the time.
None of you are particularly tall people.
Well, she got cheated. I don't know. Rosie always got cheated. But we all loved her with a passion, you know that?
Yeah.
She was always a favorite. I don't know why. I remember her as a little girl. After all, there's 7.5 years difference, there was. And she used to sit on the back porch of steps and sing herself. Rock and rock and rock and sing to herself as a little girl.
Really?
And always sucking on her tongue.
I do that.
Where did those memories come from? I never knew they existed.
It's funny.
Yeah. But we all loved her, and we all ended up going to her. Who took care of my father?
Aunt Rose.
Who helped take care of my mother?
Aunt Rose.
There's always one. And Helen couldn't because she couldn't. She was never really a very strong person. And I couldn't. Once I was married and had the children and went into business, I had no time for anything.
Right.
Until I got sick and had to give up the business. After I had my first heart attack, that took care of it.
Did it?
So ends a decade.
Many decades.
Many decades. Well, let's say it's more than one lifespan, too.
Yes. It's nice.
But then again, who's to tell that? Why? I always question why. Why did that happen? Why did the younger ones have to go and the older ones stay living?
Yeah. How old was Aunt Helen when she died?
65. And my mother was 66. Rosie was 75. Willie was 70-something.
Yeah. He had to be in his like 76 or so. 75, 76.
Wait, well, how much younger than you was he?
Who?
Uncle
Willie.
Bill.
4 years.
He was 4 years younger, and he died 6 years ago.
About that, I've lost
6 years.
track.
You know what? He died when Dory was pregnant with Hunter.
Oh, really?
Because Hunter's named for him.
Hunter's name.
Hunter William.
Oh, of course, of course.
So that's
how
10, he
old
would
would
be
he
10
be?
years younger, 74.
That's about what I thought he was.
So for you're what, 84?
Will be
I
April
will
5th.
be.
You'll be 84,
Right around the
April
corner.
5th.
April 5th.
Right
April
around the
5th.
corner.
So he would have been 10 years, that would be 10 years
Yeah.
difference.
I
So
keep
it's
thinking,
74.
all I keep thinking about is Helen's age. Because there was 2 years difference between the two of us.
Hmm.
And 2 years difference between the two of them, Helen and Willie.
And then how much for Aunt Rose?
Rosie is 7.5 years younger than I was.
So that was 3.5 more years.
Yeah, that was between Benji.
And Uncle Ben is 5 years younger than that.
Yeah,
And then Dad's 5 years younger than that.
yeah.
No, that doesn't add up right.
No?
No,
they would make it
I
17
thought you
years
said,
apart.
no,
15.
2 years apiece between the first three. Then Rosie
It's 3.5.
would have to be 3.5.
3.5.
And I know that Benji and Pootie were 4 years apart.
5
weren't
years.
they? 5
5
years?
years apart.
Well, that's it.
So there's like 2 years, 2.5
So there's
years.
2.5, yeah, they
2.5 years between Rose and
Ben.
Ben. There's like 2 years between Rose and Benji.
That's about it. Is
So
there
you wanna
anything
thank
else?
Aunt Ethel?
Thanks for coming.
I've had a very good time reliving my past that I'd completely forgotten about.
This is for Josiah's second grade class history project.
Your mother died.
My mother's brother, that was Uncle Max, took sick just a few days after my 25th anniversary.
Really?
Aunt Rose had made a surprise party for us in her backyard. That was July, that was our anniversary.
Was it really?
Yeah. And Uncle Max was there, and Henrietta was there, all our whole family. We had a wonderful time. Everybody was so thrilled. My mother's first child, my mother danced with me. We danced to that Jewish song. How we dance the night you were away.
Yeah.
She was playing that music, and my mother said, if I live to see my 25th, my child married her 25th year, I must dance with her.
Yeah.
And she danced with me.
How nice.
And we all had a wonderful time, and my sister Rosie was so excited. She was so pleased. It was a surprise. It was such a total
Were you surprised?
Such a total surprise, like you can't believe.
Really?
And
Gilbert wasn't married then, though.
who?
Was Gilbert married? Was your
My
son?
25th anniversary.
Yeah, Gilbert's married. Is Gilbert married?
No, he wasn't married yet. He couldn't be, could he?
No, he got.
A couple of days after this whole thing, my uncle took sick. Uncle Max, out of a clear sky. And they found out he had a brain tumor. He was in the hospital. Henrietta, his wife, stayed with him day and night. My mother, we all would go over to see him. I don't know, I don't remember the time it involved, but it was quite a while. And one day, and Henrietta picked up the chart and read what was wrong with him. She didn't know that he had a brain tumor. She dropped dead by his bedside.
Did she really?
Before he died. And she was buried. 2 days later, my Uncle Max died. We were praying for him to die. And when we came home from the funeral and we walked upstairs, he lived upstairs on the second floor, and Harold lived on the first floor with his wife. My mother wasn't feeling well. They helped her walk inside, and she lay down on the bed. And in Yiddish, she said, "My Kinder starb jetzt." My children, I'm dying now. And she died right there on the bed. So he had 3 funerals in 1 week. And I remember I just about collapsed. I remember that I was passing out, and I said, don't tell Gilbert, don't tell Gilbert. Because he was so close to my mother. He loved her. And,
Well, he was the first grandchild.
yeah, sure enough, the sun rose and set in him all the time. And then I went to the doctor after that, and he said, "Oh my goodness, it's a prairie fire." That's what you call a prairie fire, when death sweeps through the family like that. It was terrible. That I'll never forget. That's the end of the